The Mets' Fab Four finally broke out offensively, and we began to see the teeth of the Mets' Super-Bullpen as they were able to overcome a bad start by Kodai Senga. Also, the Mets have a new, no doubt about it, number one prospect in this farm system.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, on Saturday, the New York Mets blew out the San Francisco Giants, and I think they showed us the vision of what this team could be down the stretch. You'd like to see a little bit better out of Kodai Senga, and we will talk about him more in the next segment. But you saw the top of the lineup finally come through. You saw the bottom of the lineup turning things over and giving that top an opportunity to drive in runs. Brandon Nimmo, Francisco Lindor from the 1 and 2 spot in the lineup, driving in 7 runs. And you saw the Super-Bullpen at work where you got to lead through 4 and your starting pitcher is shaky. All right, guess what? All of a sudden, Reed Garrett's pitching in the 5th inning. And you have still arm after arm after arm behind him to be able to get through those final innings and bridge the gap to Edwin Diaz if you need to. In this game, you didn't because the Mets kept tacking on. They got to the point where, all right, go out there and get the final 3 out to Rico Garcia. It was a great win by the New York Mets. And yes, the Kodai Senga stuff is something we'll talk about in the next segment. This is now 4 starts where he struggled. And so you can begin, or maybe it's 3. I'll go through my notes here in the next segment. Regardless, it doesn't matter in this specific game. And yes, if Kodai Senga's pitches like this the rest of the way, the Mets might be in trouble. But I think he still has plenty of time to shake some of this rust off, get his mechanics in line, and find his stuff again, really find the strike zone again. But your bullpen's going to cover up a lot of warts for the starting rotation. And we now see that the Mets have a starting lineup that really can go 1 through 9. And that's the type of unit that you need to make noise come October. The Mets found something similar to that last year when you had Mark Vientos firing on all cylinders. You had Jose Iglesias having an unbelievable season playing over his head. You had, at the time, actually, JD Martinez fell off down the stretch, but you still had Jesse Winker contributing, especially come playoff time. So the Mets found some semblance of that last year. But what we're watching right now at these bats, it's different. It's if you look at it individual by individual, I think this is a much better offensive team. They haven't showed it yet, but maybe this was the beginning of them starting to, where this is going to become an offensive juggernaut over the final 2 months. Now, it all began with Pete Alonso, who seems to have found his swing again after homering the other day. His 250th home run of the season, a 3-run shot driving in Nimmo and Lindor in the bottom of the 1st inning to put the Mets up early. Kodai Senga would cough up that lead. I also actually want to mention here for Alonso, 2 home runs away from tying Darryl Strawberry for the Mets all-time record. 4 games left in this homestand, 3 games in Milwaukee, and then the Mets come back home. It would be amazing if Pete had a little 2-home-run game on Sunday, and then he can break the record at some point in the next series. But I'm just going to call my shot. August 14th is Pete Alonso replica jersey night. And the Mets will be playing the Braves. That'd be the final game of that series against the Braves. If you remember, all the way back in 2019 when Pete Alonso broke Aaron Judge's rookie home run record, it's in that final series of the season against the Braves. So that's my shot now. That's what I'm calling. I think that's when Pete does it, but he is getting very close to that awesome milestone. Now, again, Senga blew that lead that Pete Alonso provided. Gave up 1 run in the 2nd. Dom Smith hit a 2-run homer in the 3rd. And then he gave up another run in the 4th. Could have been worse, and we'll talk about why in the next segment. But luckily, Senga got out of dodge with having given up just the 4 runs. Mets were trailing 4-3 at the bottom of the 4th inning, and then they got to work. Cedric Mullins got his first hit as a Met Francisco Alvarez flew out. Mullins stole second base. Brett Baty walked. Then after the Giants grabbed a lefty to face Brandon Nimmo, he was able to find a hole in the infield for a base hit that scored Mullins. With runners at first and third, Francisco Lindor came up, batting from the right side, saying, you know what? I'm going to drop down a bunt. Pushed one pretty hard at Dom Smith. He had to play at the plate, didn't realize it. Instead, looked to second base, and there was no one there. And when it was all said and done, everybody was safe, and Lindor got a nice little gift hit there and an RBI. Unfortunately, Juan Soto hit into a double play that cost the Mets some more runs there, although Soto, that was the hardest hit ball of the game. So just some tough luck that he hit it right at somebody. Now, the Mets were winning 5-4 after that little 2-run rally. And here's where that bullpen was able to show up. As I mentioned, now you're sticking Reed Garrett out there in the fifth inning. And Garrett gets through the fifth inning, no problem. Faces off against a righty in the top of the sixth inning, gets an out, hands it off to Gregory Soto, who does give up a hit, but then picks up a couple of strikeouts and is able to get through that inning unscathed. Bottom of the sixth inning, Francisco Alvarez hits a 1-out single. Brett Baty draws a walk. Brandon Nimmo gets another base hit, driving in Alvarez. Lindor then finds a hole to drive in Baty. Couple more runs for the Mets. Tyler Rogers comes out in the seventh inning to make his Mets debut. Gave up a single, but then got 3 consecutive outs to put up a 0. Ryan Helsley was warming up for the eighth because it was looking like it might be one of those games that was going to be close, and you had to do whatever it was to get a victory. But then the Mets were able to rally and sit Helsley down with 1 out. Ronnie Mauricio drew a walk. Cedric Mullins got hit by a pitch. Francisco Alvarez flew out. With 2 outs, Brett Baty singles to load the bases. Then Nimmo comes up, gets another single to drive in his third run of the game. Francisco Lindor doubles in 2 more, 4 RBI day for him. And then a wild pitch scores the 4th run of the inning. All of a sudden, the Mets are in double digits with their runs scored, and they were able to really cruise to a victory after that. But the crazy thing about this bullpen is, all right, we're going to sit down Helsley, get a lower leverage reliever up. Who comes into the game? Brooks Raley, who a week ago we thought might be the 8th inning guy for this team. Now he is 5th on the pecking order. You got Diaz, Helsley, Rogers, Garrett, and then you're kind of flipping a coin between Soto and Raley. But it's pretty impressive, and what makes it even more impressive, Raley put up another 0, and that is now 25 consecutive scoreless appearances for Brooks Raley in recorded competition, dating back to September 20th of 2023. He had 3 more scoreless appearances after that run he allowed on the 20th. He then did not give up a run. Actually, if we want to go to spring training, that might be that's the one thing that'll throw off my little stat there. I had to look and see, did Brooks Raley give up runs in spring training? I'm not going to do that. We'll just ignore the spring training of 2024. But he did not give up any runs in the season in 2024, and did not give up any runs across his rehab appearances, has not given up any runs in his 6 appearances since coming back. So it really continues to be a really nice arm for the Mets, but one that is way down on the pecking order now. And the Mets were able to pick up a 12th run in the bottom of the 8th inning as Pete Alonso hit a leadoff double, took third base on the plays. There was a throwing error, getting that ball in from the outfield, and then he scored on a ground out by Jeff McNeil. Juan Soto was 1 for 5 without a run scored or an RBI. The rest of the lineup, everybody scored or drove in a run. Nimmo 3 for 4, Lindor 3 for 4, Alonso 2 for 4 with a homer and a double, 2 runs scored. Those 3 scored 5 of the Mets' 12 runs. They drove in 10 of the Mets' 12 runs. All 5 hitters behind them either scored a run or drove in a run, and they all got on base. Jeff McNeil drove in a run. Did not score. You had Mauricio, Mullins, Alvarez, and Baty all score. Baty scored 3 times, Mullins twice. So a great day for the Mets offense. Rico Garcia, as I mentioned, came in the 9th inning, finished off the game. Did give up a 2-run homer, but who cares? The Mets were up so big. Unfortunately for Rico, he's been pitching a lot lately. He is that one spot in the bullpen right now. The Mets are going to have a little bit of interchangeability, and so he gets DFA'd after the game. We'll talk about that in a minute. Also want to talk about Kodai Senga's poor start. So we're going to go through some of the questions about the Mets starting rotation and where this pitching staff goes from here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need the extra boost to stay sharp and energized. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order. It cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavor 5-Hour Energy shots today. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. I'd love to get there by the end of the season. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Now, Kodai Senga allowed 12 runs across his first 13 starts this year in 73 and 2/3 innings pitched. He had a 1.47 ERA. Then he hit the IL, comes back, puts up 4 scoreless against the Royals in his first start. But since then, he's given up 4 runs in 3 innings, his next one, 3 runs in 5 innings. And then this start, 4 runs in 4 innings pitched, did not make it out of the 4th inning. He walked 3, and walks are the biggest thing, but even more so than the walks, because Senga, when he's right, he's still going to walk some batters. It's the fact that he was behind in every single count. I feel like every single count, he was down 3-0. Did not have the ghost fork. Really didn't have any of his pitches, but you see Kodai Senga, when he really leans more into fastball cutter, he's just trying to survive. He's just trying to pitch to contact and find outs. And even then, for the most part, he's able to work his way out of some things. This could have been a much worse start from Senga. He could have given up way more runs than just the 4 that he allowed. But still, it's a little bit concerning when you see 3 in a row that have been bad. But I also think that Kodai Senga is the type of pitcher where a couple of things can be messing with him. A mechanical change, if he locks something in, if he's able to find out what's off, all of a sudden he can go on a complete run and a heater where it's 7 starts in a row, giving up 1 run or less every single start. So we know what Kodai Senga can do when he's right. He's just not right now, and that's evidenced by the fact that he threw 71 pitches, only 37 were strikes, 34 were balls. When Kodai Senga is right, he might still walk 4 batters in a given start, but the walks are completely different than the walks we saw in this one, where it was a guy that just couldn't find the zone. Typically, when Kodai Senga's on, but he still has a start where he walks a lot of guys, it's him as a veteran navigating the matchups in a lineup to what suits him best. So if he gave up a leadoff double and Rafael Devers is up, for example, he might throw some competitive ghost forks out of the zone and see if he can get ahead on a hitter and then try to put him away outside of the zone. But if they're not going to get themselves out, if they're patient, take first base, because the guy behind you, I might know that I have a good matchup here where I can throw a cutter and get a ground ball and get out of the inning. So when he is sort of picking and choosing when he wants to pitch around guys and walk guys, that's not an issue. Like, you might see a start where Kodai Senga will walk 4 batters in 4 innings. The difference is when he's on, he hasn't given up any runs, and those walks were all strategically placed as he was navigating a lineup, and he's going after the hitters that he wants to in the zone without any issues. So yes, it's a little bit concerning, but I think the great part about this super bullpen the Mets have built is it covers up for Kodai Senga. It covers up for all these guys, and it changes sort of the goal line. It changes the goal post, where you're not looking at a start and thinking, all right, I have to get into the 7th inning because all we got in the bullpen today is Brooks Raley and Ryan Stanek, because Reed, Garrett, and Diaz both pitched the last 2 days. Now all of a sudden you have so much more depth in that bullpen, where there's pretty much always going to be 3 arms back there that you like, and even then, probably even more than that. And if you can get through 5 innings, you're fine. Your bullpen's going to be able to cover the last 4, and today they're able to cover the last 5. So it really does hedge a lot of the rotation concerns. Obviously, you need Kodai Senga to pitch better than this. There's no doubt about that. But I look at David Peterson continuing to just be as consistent as they come. You have Sean Manaea, where for him, he has been able to attack the zone, and his stuff is playing in the zone. It's just a matter of getting himself back to sort of a more stretched out workload and feeling confident and comfortable getting above 100 pitches, which Still might take a couple more starts for him. I feel pretty good that Manaea is going to lock it in, and I still believe that Kodai Senga will as well. It's just might take a couple of starts for him to find whatever's off his mechanics that he can iron out, and then I think he'll be back to same old Kodai Senga. But the Mets right now have this bullpen, and it's going to change the way games look from here on out because they just have so many good options back there that you're going to be excited to get the ball in the hands of your bullpen, where you're not going to be thinking, oh man, why could Frankie Montas only go 5? It's, the Mets are winning 3-2 right now. And yes, Montas is at 78 pitches, but the top of the Giants lineup is coming up. So yeah, you know what? We're not going to go to Montas right now. We're going to go to, pick your reliever. I mean, Tyler Rogers is going to come in the 6th inning because it's a tough spot in the lineup. You don't get through that, and then maybe you'll throw Stanek in the 7th because it's a weaker spot in the lineup, bottom in the lineup, and it turns back over to the top, and you go Helsley Diaz to close, and you're good to go. I mean, that's what this bullpen can do, and it's really exciting to see how the Mets were able to get around a creative problem, which is, all right, how do you build out a pitching staff? And they could have used some of their absolute top pitching prospects likely to go out and get a starting pitcher, but there wasn't one on the market that was worth it. So go out there, get 3 top-end relief arms because Gregory Soto becomes a forgotten man on this team now. He was the first addition. Go out, build a super bullpen, and your pitching staff is going to have enough when it's all said and done. Now, speaking of what they have in their staff, Rico Garcia, again, as I mentioned, going to get DFA'd. My guess is Austin Warren is going to come up to replace him. Warren went down sometime in the middle of August, so he's good to come back, and I would think he's the guy. Paul Blackburn had another solid rehab start on Saturday, went 5 1/3, gave up 2 runs, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts, has a 2.45 ERA in 7 starts in Syracuse now. He's going to be out of rehab purgatory. They're going to put him on the roster in some capacity. It's just a matter of what they will do with him. They could, if they want to, have him pitch out of the bullpen as a long man, but he hasn't been good in that role. He hasn't seemed comfortable in that role. So I really don't know what the Mets do. This is a guy that we thought they might trade at the deadline just to send him off to a different place and be able to, have a clear depth chart and not worry about him having to clog up a spot in their bullpen. But if they weren't getting anything of value, if it's a prospect that you just don't even like, no point in trading him and sacrificing the depth that he provides, because imagine the Mets traded Blackburn and then something happened to one of their starters in the first couple games after the deadline. You'd be kicking yourself. Part of me almost wonders if this team would be better if they just slid Blackburn into that 5th spot in their rotation and they move Clay Holmes to the bullpen. Because I've been on this now for a week, ever since seeing the last Clay Holmes start. I just don't know how much longer they can keep on doing this. And who knows? Maybe that's in the works. Right now, they have yet to announce a starter beyond. I think they have Manaea listed for the first game of the next series against the Guardians. They haven't announced their starters for Tuesday or Wednesday. David Peterson should go on Wednesday. They're not going to announce that, though, right now if they are having any doubts about Clay Holmes. Remember, I did sort of talk about it after Holmes' last start that Nolan McLean pitched the same day. If you wanted to, you could piggyback those guys. The only thing is, if you do that, that's going to cost you a spot on the roster, and you have Paul Blackburn ready to return here. So that's where it gets a little bit complicated, where, yeah, you say, cool, do a Clay Holmes, Nolan McLean piggyback situation on Tuesday. The only way that you could do that is if you sort of flew in the face of what you said previously with David Stearns, where he said that when he calls up one of the top pitching prospects, he wants to give them runway. So one way that you could get around it, you keep Paul Blackburn set aside because he just pitched. You have Nolan McLean make his debut with Clay Holmes on Tuesday, and then you send McLean down and put Paul Blackburn up. But again, that would only be giving McLean one start or relief appearance and putting him back into Syracuse for 2 weeks, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but it's just something to think about. Again, I do wonder if the Mets maybe let Holmes make one more start if it doesn't go well. Maybe they then go to Blackburn for the next turn. He's not going to be able to pitch, you wouldn't think, in the upcoming series because he just went through. So he likely won't be able to pitch until that series in Milwaukee. And who knows, maybe if they decide that Holmes is going to be removed from the rotation after his next start. Maybe the move is to slide Blackburn in front of Kodai Senga, give Senga an extra day, and then that's your rotation moving forward. We'll see what the Mets decide to do. I think Blackburn is going to have some role. Obviously, I don't think they're just going to cut him, but I don't like him in a long man role. Not that I love him as a starting pitcher, but he's throwing 90 pitches and he's fully stretched out. He's got to have a much fresher arm than Clay Holmes. So part of me thinks that right now, if you really had to look at who would be more effective, I think for both roles, it might make more sense for Blackburn to be in the rotation because I think Clay Holmes would be significantly more effective than Paul Blackburn would in the bullpen because he has the experience of doing it. And I think if you were able to give Holmes a little bit of a breather and shorten him up to 50 pitches and make him like a 2-3 inning weapon out of the bullpen that you use, with 3 days off in between each appearance, that's a really nice way to utilize Clay Holmes. I can't get off of it, obviously. I keep on talking about it, but we'll see what they decide to do there. Again, you got Frankie Montas going today against Carson Whisenhunt, who was thinking, I think it was his second appearance of the year, a top prospect for the Giants. So we'll see what he has to offer, and if the Mets can score some runs on Whisenhunt. Hopefully Montas can pitch a little bit better this time. He did not face the Giants yet this season, so new matchup for him. We'll see how that goes, and we'll be talking about that game tomorrow. But we're not done today. I want to talk a little bit about the Mets' top prospects, particularly what I think is now the consensus top prospect in the Mets system. One guy has risen above the rest, and that's Carson Benge. I want to talk about him more here in just a minute. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service to get updates from me anytime news breaks the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways and get the lineup graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, Carson Benge has played 25 games in Double-A now. He's hitting .375, .469, .656 slug with 7 home runs, 4 doubles, and a triple in 25 games. Has 18 RBIs. He's walking more than he's striking out. 16 walks to 14. Excuse me. 16 walks to 14 strikeouts. 4 stolen bases on 5 attempts. He's got 19 bags on the season now in 22 attempts. Not a ton of home runs because it's really tough to homer when you're playing in Brooklyn. You got that wind blowing in off Coney Island, particularly as a left-handed hitter. But for him to now break out with 7 home runs in 25 games played in Double-A, that does show you that there is some real power potential to dream on. He's a good defender in center field. This is a absolute steal at pick, 19 for the Mets last year. The first round selection by this front office, and it's looking to be an outstanding one. I think that's why the New York Mets, not that Jaron Duran was really on the market for too long, but I think that's why the Mets were shopping rentals because they got so much talent coming that at the deadline, yeah, you know what? Go out and get the rentals because you're trading from parts of your farm system that are probably going to be excess because you can only have 40 guys on a 40-man roster. And you need to have some flexibility in a given season, as we've seen with how much bullpen turnover there's always going to be in the big leagues. Granted, the better arms you have, the less turnover there will be. The Mets didn't have any turnover for the first, whatever it was, 6 weeks of the season. It was remarkable. And then we've seen what's happened since. So you look at 40-man roster spots, they're gold. That's why I think the Mets, the more and more that you look at that trade with the Giants, part of it also was they were able to clear 3 spots on their 40-man roster. Essentially. I mean, Drew Gilbert wasn't on the 40 yet, but he was going to have to be. Rule 5 draft eligible in the offseason, a guy that would have been selected. You don't want to lose him for nothing, so you trade him right now off of a heater in July where you got way more value than you would in the offseason, where everybody would know you're pushing up against a guy that you probably don't want to add to your 40. And not that Drew Gilbert couldn't have been on the 40-man roster and couldn't have been a 4th outfielder for the Mets next year, but you have Carson Benge. I'd rather Carson Benge have a clear path to be the starting center fielder for the New York Mets in 2026 and remove the guy in Drew Gilbert, who's 25 years old, who has a much better shot at having a successful beginning to his pro career with a team in the Giants that doesn't have that depth, that doesn't have 2 high-priced outfielders locked into each corner. And they have the ability to stick Drew Gilbert in left field and see what happens. So you look at the trades from a different lens, it makes sense because of the upper echelon talent that you weren't willing to trade. You go for rentals, you clear out some 40-man spots in that particular deal, and you envision your future in 2026 where there's every chance Carson Benge is the starting center fielder for the New York Mets. We'll see what he does for the rest of the season. We'll see if he makes it the triple by the end of the year. But this is a guy that with each stop, he's getting better. In low A last year, 15 games played after getting drafted, had an 856 OPS. He had 60 games in Brooklyn this year, had an 897 OPS. Now 25 games in double A, his OPS is over 1100. Now, is that going to be sustainable? No. But man, is he swinging the bat well. And you just wonder how quickly can he make his way up, because he's going to be 23 years old in January, but a really polished player, the type of guy that you might want to just give the runway at the beginning of the season, because Carson Benge can win a Rookie of the Year and you can get some draft capital on the back end of it all. So with the PPI, the prospect promotion incentive, by not holding him in the minor leagues, by letting him win a job in spring training potentially, that can happen. And I really think the Mets might go into spring training with a really crazy competition, particularly in center field, because Jet Williams is coming too. He's actually younger than Bench. He'll turn 22 in November. Jet has played his entire season in Double-A, 90 games played, in 278, 387 on base, 483 slug, 10 home runs, 28 doubles, 5 triples, 29 stolen bases on 35 attempts. He's played 52 games at shortstop, 15 at second, 16 in center field. Right now, I think Benge and Jet are your top 2 prospects in this farm system over all of those talented arms. I know some might say, oh, Jonah Tong or Nolan McLean should be the top prospect in the system. And maybe. But for me, position players are always going to get a little bit more of a bump when you're ranking prospects. And I'm seeing center field now in 2026 and thinking, what else could the Mets do? They're not going to sign a center fielder unless Cedric Mullins just ingratiates himself to the point where you can't possibly lose him. And I don't think that's going to happen. Not that I think that he's going to have a bad run. I think he's going to be a very nice contributor for this team. But I believe you're going to look in free agency and say, you know what, we're going to keep, at that point, you might still have Jose Siri on the roster. So you're going to keep Jose Siri and Tyrone Taylor competing in spring training, but having a pretty open competition, knowing that Jet Williams, Luis and Acuna for that matter, but particularly Jet Williams and Carson Benge, either of them could be your center fielder in 2026, whoever is more ready to go at that point. And Jet could very well be your second baseman. So these 2 guys, I think, are going to contribute in 2026, whether that is come opening day, whether that is middle of the season, but they're doing really impressive things in Double-A, particularly what Benge has done lately, where I think you got to put him as the top overall prospect in this system because the ceiling is so high. You're talking about a guy that can bring 5 tools to center field and actually stick out there. With Jet Williams, he's a little bit undersized to be a center fielder. And obviously in center field, you don't need power, but I think Benge brings a little bit more power to the table. Just longer levers and ability to maybe get the ball in the air a little bit more. But I also think Jet has more power than it's given credit. I think a lot of people see the frame and think, guy is undersized. He's not going to get into his power. I had a crazy comp for Jet Williams early on when he had his breakout season a couple years ago, where I said, look, I don't know what Jet Williams will become, and I'm not going to say, oh, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. But what I did say was look back at Jose Altuve when he was a prospect. And back then, he looked a lot like Jet Williams. Undersized guy, really good defender at second base, a guy that wasn't quite getting into his power yet, but had great plate discipline, was getting on base a ton, and was using his speed on the bases. And then the more and more Altuve has gotten, deeper and deeper into his career, the power has just continued to add because he's a guy with great plate discipline. And, he knows when he can guess right a lot where, okay, if fastball's coming. And I guess with the Astros, the guessing right thing, sometimes they have a little bit of extra answers there. But still, the point stands. I think most prospect analysts would look at Jet Williams and say, he's probably capped at about 15 home runs in the big leagues. I wouldn't be so sure. I could see a world where Jet gets into more power than a lot of the analysts are projecting right now. But still, I think Jet is a little bit behind Carson Benge. I know at Just Baseball, we just had an update, and there's still six Mets prospects on the top 100. You still have Jet Williams, Carson Benge, Jonah Tong, Nolan McLean, Brennan Sproat, and Jacob Reimer. But all of a sudden, Carson Benge has flown up into our top 20. He started this season as the number 100 prospect in our preseason ranking, as Aram Layden, who does the top 100, just could not leave him off the list. He was sort of a placeholder, and sometimes I talked about going into the year. That number 100 spot is almost more of an honor than the number 95 spot, because it was the last guy that was able to make the list before you cut it off. But he has risen every single update we've had to the point now where he went from 100 in the preseason to all the way up to 19 on our most recent top 100. So I'll throw that top 100 into the episode descriptions if you want to read about any of the write-ups on Benge from a scout's perspective, on Jet Williams, the pitchers with McLean and Sproat and Tong, or Jacob Reimer, a guy that a lot of people still don't know too much about, the Mets' top third base prospect right now. Anyway, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. I'll have another show for you guys tomorrow, breaking down whatever happens in the final game of the series against the Giants, and also looking ahead to the Guardians coming into town to close out this homestand. So make sure you check that out. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure if you are listening on the audio side, you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can follow me on social media at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local host from each team, league-wide host from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.